Hey guys, I wanted to make this video kind of covering the entire 7-part Setting the Stage series, recapping the events while also discussing elements I left out, and also getting into my plan for future videos as we get into the Sengoku Jidai. I would have made this video sooner, but I was actually in Japan on vacation, absorbing the rich culture and history firsthand before I moved there for a job I was offered which starts next spring. So, with that out of the way, let's jump into the timeline of events throughout the Setting the Stage series, ultimately setting things up for the Warring States period that is to come. We start the series off in the mid-600s, before the Shogun or the samurai existed. At this time, Japan as a nation is known as Yamato and controls the territory from the central to the southwestern islands, largely ruled by the emperor, who exerts his authority through provincial lords. By the late 600s, Yamato loses their ally of Baekje in Korea. This would eventually force Yamato to establish a conscript army to defend against possible invasions from the mainland, while also keeping the growing might of the provincial clans in check. A century later, during the 700s, Yamato found itself at war with the Emishi people from the north. The mismanaged conscript army would eventually be assigned a temporary grand commander who would come to be known as the Shogun, who in theory would be able to better lead the conscripts against the Emishi. By 811, the emperor had recognized that the clans had better professional warriors known as Bushi, who were essentially their own class in Japanese society. This, coupled with poor shogunal leadership, would cause the ineffective conscript army to be dismantled, allowing for a shift to rely more heavily on armies of Bushi to finally defeat the Emishi, uniting the territory which would become known as Japan. In 825, grandsons of the Emperor Kanmu would be given the name Taira, which would continue on to become the first Bushi-governed clan by 889. We can also see that in 897, the Minamoto would also be established as a warrior-dominated clan. Eventually, in the mid-900s, the clans would start to become increasingly autonomous and rebellious, leading to conflict and the weakening of the imperial state's grip over the country. Most prominent of these rebellions were that of Taira no Masakado, Fujiwara Sumitomo, and the Abe clan. It is here we also see the rise of the Fujiwara clan, who would come to take over the imperial court. Lastly, during the 900s, we can also view the transformation of the Bushi class into being called samurai. By the beginning of the 1100s, the Taira and Minamoto were seen as the two strongest clans militarily, and were often looked to for aid in conflict rather than the imperial state. Thus, they were really seen as the two powerhouses in the country and not the central government. In 1156, an imperial succession dispute led to the outbreak of the Hogain Rebellion, which would see fighting throughout the imperial capital as samurai clans stepped in to settle the matter. By the end, the power of both the Taira and Minamoto had only grown more prominent. 4 years later, in 1160, the Minamoto and Fujiwara would attempt to establish true dominance over the country in the Heiji Rebellion. However, they would be defeated by the Taira, leading to all remaining Minamoto lords being sent into exile. For the next 20 years, between 1160 and 1180, the Taira would attempt to control the country through influencing the imperial court and the emperor himself. However, by 1180, the retired emperor Go-Shirakawa would grow tired of the Taira meddling in political affairs and attempt to rid the capital from all Taira influence. This would result in the Taira clan retaliating by putting a stronger grip over the capital and making the Taira-born Prince Antoku the new emperor. This caused all of Japan to rile into the Genpei War, as the exiled Minamoto lords came out of exile to take the fight to the Taira. By 1185, the Taira would be defeated by the Minamoto at the Battle of Dan no Ura, ending the Genpei War. and allowing the Minamoto to essentially run the country from their power base in Kamakura, while making the emperor and imperial court roughly no more than figureheads. In 1192, the leader of the Minamoto clan, Minamoto Yoritomo, would officially become the new shogun, military leader for all Japan. This would also lead to his power base in Kamakura being known as the Bakufu, or the Shogunate. As shogun, Yoritomo could grant lands to clans, especially land from the defeated Taira clan, to go to those who fought loyally on the Minamoto side of the Genpei War. Minamoto Yoritomo would die in 1199, leaving his son Minamoto Yorie in charge, who would later also take up the title of shogun, officially making it a hereditary position. However, by this time we can see that the real power behind the shogunate was really the Hojo clan, who had cleverly influenced their way into the inner workings of the Bakufu. In 1221, the emperor and the court wished to reclaim their past power and went to war against the shogunate. Yet, they would be swiftly defeated, forcing the imperial court to come under the control of the shogunate. The next 50 years would be relatively peaceful, yet the peace would be interrupted in 1274 when the Mongol Empire attempted to expand its reach over to Japan. The first Mongol invasion would be somewhat successful, but would ultimately fail when the first divine wind would sweep through, decimating the Mongol navy. In 1281, the Mongols would try a second invasion that would fail again, largely due to the second divine wind. The Mongol invasions would come to alter samurai combat, as Japan would need to change up their military format to be able to compete with military advancements on the mainland. The Mongol invasions, however, would have an ultimately disastrous effect on the Kamakura shogunate. This can be seen by the late 1200s, when the Kamakura shogunate began to lose its grip on Kyoto, allowing for the emperor and the court to become more independent. In 1318, things worsened for the shogunate when the ambitious emperor Go-Daigo took the throne and began plotting to topple the shogun. Though the shogunate would initially stop his scheming, he would start up his plans once again in 1332, forcing him to flee Kyoto to a fortified temple, where he began mustering a force loyal to the emperor. His armies managed to grow large due to samurai that were frustrated with the shogunate, most of which were samurai who had fought the Mongols and received nothing in return due to the fact that the Mongols were an external threat. This began the Genpei War. In 1333, with the shogunate winning the war, a large force set out from Kyoto to defeat the remaining imperial loyalists in the west. However, the leader of this grand army, Ashikaga Takauji, would end up betraying the shogunate by returning to Kyoto to reclaim it for the emperor. This marked a turning point in the war, as the imperial loyalists were then able to finally defeat the shogunate. The emperor Go-Daigo would then set out to reshape Japan back into the state it was in prior to the Genpei War. Of course, this would go on to anger the samurai class, whose authority was largely being diminished. By 1336, many samurai would rebel, leading to Ashikaga Takauji overthrowing the emperor and establishing the new Ashikaga shogunate in Kyoto. Though Go-Daigo would escape and create a rather powerless southern court in Nara, the third Ashikaga shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, would finally see to the disestablishment of the southern court in 1392. And that's where we leave things off. In the videos to come, I will address the weakness of the Ashikaga shoguns and the eventual Onin War, which would set off the Sengoku Jidai. For the series on the Sengoku Jidai, I also plan on going about making the series much differently than the Setting the Stage series, largely because I want to go much more in depth with the characters and events of this very iconic period. I'm not entirely sure yet how the format will look, but of course, the end goal will always be to make the videos interesting and informative. Also, being a huge fan of classic samurai cinema, I hope to start making samurai movie reviews soon as well. I can easily say that the first samurai movie review I do, whenever I do it, will be Akira Kurosawa's 1954 classic, Seven Samurai, because Seven Samurai is often seen as the most famous samurai film, and I believe it to be the best starting place for anyone getting into classic samurai movies. And trust me, samurai game reviews will still be coming at some point as well. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is just some unsaid minor details from the Setting the Stage series. Things I left out that I want to come back now to address. To start off, I want to make a reminder that this channel centers itself on Japanese military history. Thus, many details on the evolution of Japanese culture and politics I tend to stay away from. Although there is still much to be said about culture and politics when they have to do with military and conflict. Now, one of the big things I left out was the mentioning of stories, primarily the tale of the Soga brothers, the tale of the Heike, the tale of Genji, along with stories of Minamoto Yoshitsune and Benkei. These stories are an interesting look into Japanese history and conflict, yet much of the events depicted in them are either exaggerated or are fantasy. Thus, I decided not to touch on them during the Setting the Stage series, although I may return to make videos on them in the future. Another detail I never mentioned were the names Genji and Heike, both of which being alternate names for the Minamoto and Taira clans. Genji for the Minamoto and Heike for the Taira. This is how we get the name for the Genpei War, as it sort of combines the two names of the clans together. The last thing I want to mention is that there are things I did not discuss, though I could have. I instead decided it would be much better to address these things later in the next series or in standout videos of their own. These include the development of the katana and other iconic weaponry, the development of samurai armor, the importance of head taking, and the role of religion within samurai culture. So, with all of that said, I'm extremely excited to move forward with this channel, and of course, once again, I want to thank all of you for being here and showing your support. It really is inspiring to hear that these videos are enjoyed. Now, with that all out of the way, I'll see you all again very soon.